After e4, e5, knight c3, the Vienna game is on the board. Black playing bishop c5 is one of the many variations that can happen. White goes on with f4. The gambit is happening no matter what. We went through the bishop c5 variation of the Vienna game in the very first 2 videos of the saga, so there's a few more things to talk about. After d6, white plays knight to f3. We've already opened our f-pawn, so the r knight can be developed without staying in front of the f-pawn, which means that when we castle, but not now, but we are going to eliminate the dark square bishop. This is a strong bishop. And then castle, the rook will be immediately on an open file. Also because the pawn swap on between f and e depends entirely on us. So after knight f3 and knight c6, white goes on with thematic knight a4. So in the first 2 videos of the Vienna Gambit saga, I went through bishop g4 and everything that happens next. In this game, we're going to go through the main move, which is bishop to b6, which makes perfect sense. This is thematic as well. The idea is that when the knight takes the bishop, you can take back with the pawn and the rook is on an open file already. After bishop b6, white goes on with bishop b5. No need to take this bishop right now because we can take it anytime we want. So after bishop b5, we're going to quickly look at 3 moves. One of them being bishop to g4, pinning our knight. Also because since we're pinning the knight in c6, the idea is simple. See, if it's white to move now and you take the knight, then pawn takes back, then you can take the pawn in e5 and you wrap a pawn. If black takes back, yeah, you don't really have to take this pawn immediately, but most importantly, you've created this long-term weakness. So in this position, after bishop b5, bishop g4 is the main move. That is attacked immediately. Now, when the pawn is still on f4, is not being taken by the black player in this case, you can play h3 without any regret, because bishop h5 is not possible because of g4, bishop g6, f5. We all know this trap. So after bishop takes knight, queen takes back, we are still threatening to take this knight, pawn takes back, and then pawn takes and isolate these 2 pawns. It's going to look really bad. So after this move, how to react to this? Knight to e7. Now there's no point in taking this knight, so white goes on with c3. The idea is to play d4 and support the pawn in d, also because we might think of pushing d5 later on, but it depends on what black will do. After castle, white plays the crucial f5 move. This is very important. This deprives the opponent knight any possibility to go anywhere on these light squares like f5 and g6. Also allows us to keep pushing pawns. The center is quite close, which means we don't really worry about any attack on our king. So what happens after pawn to a6, attacking the bishop? Then now it's time to take this bishop. The reason being, black cannot open the file. So when black has the bishop in b6, if you take, a takes and the rook is stronger, but when he plays a6, then you can take. Now here black can't take this bishop because he's got to prioritize the rook unless he wants to give up material for nothing. So after pawn takes knight, now bishop to a4. Position is already winning for black. We have the bishop pair much more expanded on the king side than our opponent is, much more advanced. So let's say, for example, d5 for black. Black might be interested in swapping central pawns since our king is in the center. Simply f6 now, attacking the knight. And taking the pawn in e4 doesn't work. So there's a Zwischenzug. So if pawn takes, then you can take the knight. That comes with an attack on the queen. And so when the queen gets taken, you can take the opponent queen, you wrap material. So after f6 and knight to g6, pawn can take in d5, and it's defended by a queen. So it's a clean pawn up. But besides this, knight will be forced to go to a silly square afterwards. And also we have a passed pawn now. In this position, we've mentioned how d5, in order to try to open up the central files, considering that our king is on castle, doesn't work. What happens after f6 now? Stopping our deadly f6 pawn move. Now bishop b3 check, king moves, and now a3. The idea is to remain on this unbelievable diagonal. This is crucial to understand because knight a5 here, and you don't really get to go to bishop c2 because it's a silly diagonal. Not even d4 might necessarily help you because black will just keep the pawns on the dark squares, and even swapping, this bishop is never going to be effective. So that's why a move like a3 is necessary, because you see knight a5, now you're forced to go to c2. It's not a good diagonal. So rook to c8 now for black. Let's play a few moves just to see how to take this. d3 now, allowing the development of the dark square bishop. Black can't push d5 because we have too much attack on it. Knight a5 doesn't do anything because of bishop a2. So we're threatening g4, h4, g5, and so on. Let's see what happens after this idea. g6, where we take, and after the knight takes back, it looks like maybe the black player can finally, I don't know, play queen e7, queen g7, rook g8, trying to just play a completely normal game. Black now plays bishop to h6, attacking the rook, and after rook to e8, well, rook to g8 is not possible because of the bishop. Rook to e8 is met by bishop f7, and the rook is trapped, so you're winning material. Rook e7 doesn't work because of queen f6, checkmate. Right, these are examples. Most of these lines might happen for real because those are the most logical moves, and also I show mistakes, but I also show what happens when the opponent plays the best moves in certain variations. In the bishop c5 variation, f4, d6, knight f3, and now knight c6. This is what we're going through in this video. We attack the bishop immediately. Bishop to b6. We don't need to take it straight away. Bishop b5. And earlier we went through bishop g4 ideas. We've explained also what happens with the knight. We want to take the knight and take the pawn in e5. What happens after this annoying move? What happens after knight g to e7? Straight away. Okay, now we take the bishop. Pawn take back, and this is pretty strange because we've just made this rook stronger, but that was actually the whole plan of knight a4. You want to take this bishop, preferably you want to take that bishop after a6 so that you don't open the a file for the rook. But anyway, now white goes on to take this pawn because this knight is pinned. It might be true that the black knight is defended by the other knight, which will be attacking the square e5, but the thing is that this knight is specifically pinned. So now after castle, best move by white is to take back, and so that means we are up 2 pawns now, so black takes back. Black might try to have done something like this for the sake of more development and to keep the pawn structure fine. Right now the black player is better developed than white. He's got 3 pieces out and castle king. We've got 2 pieces out and that's it. So we have to play accurate now. The best move is c3. This is the most solid because he also stops potential knight b4, knight d4 ideas. He also allows a way out for the queen, and most importantly threatens to play d4. So we'll see how to take it from here. Let's say if black plays queen to c5, attacking the bishop and stopping us from castling. This is a typical move that they play thematic. So you just play a4, keep the bishop. Don't be afraid of this move. Queen takes bishop, pawn takes back, and then rook takes, because there's nothing for the black player, also because the pawn will be attacking the knight, but either ways it will just be a really stupid move. So after rook to e8 now, placing the rook in an excellent square, white plays d4 attacking the queen. The queen moves to d6, and now finally castle. White is completely winning this endgame, as you can tell. Better pawn structure, better center, rook run open file, bishop pair on the board, very strong pawn chain in the center. In this position, if instead of queen c5, black plays bishop to g4, pinning the knight, then simply d4. So there's now like too many moves that can happen. It depends on what black will do, and we're completely out of theory here, but let's just mention what's going on in this game basically. So the black knight doesn't have anywhere that makes sense to go to. Knight a5 doesn't make sense. You got nowhere to go next. None of the squares, the dark squares in the center, is accessible. White has an idea of playing e5. This knight from e7 is not going anywhere. Well, the best move according to the engine is knight to g6, but the center is just too strong for white. Position, like, it's almost like +2 or something, and we're not even done developing the pieces, so you can imagine. White's best move now is bishop e2 because you're not pinning anything. The bishop is pointless in that square, so the bishop is going back to e2. And after rook f to e8, putting pressure on this pawn, e5, simply attacking the queen. The queen will have to move. There's quite a lot that can go wrong. Look at this center. The queen will have to avoid all the forks, like queen d5. These are not good moves because you can play c4, queen e6, you got d5. So after queen to, let's say, d7, castle. And again, f6 here to try to undermine this incredible center of the white player. So a move like f6 here, for example, to try and undermine this incredible center is just wrong because you can take it. After take back h3, black is forced to give up the bishop for our knight, improve the position even more. Look at the black king. Position is evaluated around +3 already if you think about it. This is a isolated pawn. We've got the bishop pair. I mean, this bishop, this queen are about to become monsters, so you can take it from there. In this position, what happens after knight c to e7, the idea of having 2 potential central squares to go to, simply h3, attack the bishop. Bishop cannot go to h5 because g4 wins the piece. So after bishop takes knight and rook takes back, knight f5 is not really an option because now rook f2 is the best move, with the idea of playing bishop g4 and win the game on the spot. So after knight to d5 in this position, white's best move is bishop g5, provoking f6, which of course should not happen because the black player will be in huge trouble, as we've seen. So after h6 attacking the bishop, we go back to d2. We have created a weakness, and the idea with bishop g5 was also queen to f1, putting pressure on f7. So let's look at this idea now, c5. Can black really try to undermine the control of the center that we have? c5 is not a problem because we're supported by the c pawn. Queen b3 is the best move. The idea is to play bishop to b5, but we're going to stop the line here because we're already +4 evaluated on the engine. And you can also try to remember all the patterns that you've seen. If the move order is reversed sometimes when you play in your games, or like of course your opponent's more likely to play moves that I didn't go through rather than moves that I went through, but you get the patterns, you know the ideas. That's the most important thing to remember. Strengths and weaknesses of every position. One more recap, look at another line is bishop c5, f4, d6, knight f3, knight c6. Very normal beginning. Knight a4. The bishop goes back to b6, and now bishop to b5. What happens after bishop to d7? With the idea, of course, of safeguarding this e5 pawn, because now if we take the knight, bishop takes back, then pawn takes back here. We're not really smashing the pawn structure of our opponent. It's actually just fine, and also this bishop becomes good. And we've given away the bishop pair for absolutely nothing. Yes, we might take this bishop in b6, but then black develops the rook like that, and black is just fine. So this is a really bad way to play chess. So in this position, after bishop, just go to d7, d3, developing, and after a6, how to take it from here now? Okay, knight takes bishop as we understood, because we're attacking the rook, and because now the rook cannot take, because now black cannot play a takes b, developing the rook. So now black has to take with the c pawn, which is still okay. It's not like we have got a great advantage or anything, but it's just the best move in the position. Now we take, surprisingly, and after bishop takes back, the idea obviously here taking with the pawn looks normal, but then you do have double attack over the pawn in e5, and you'll be able to win that pawn with no compensation at all. So after, anyway, the funny thing is that black taking to c6 doesn't really stop us. So you might wonder, okay, well, we can do it anyway. Yeah, but bishop to c6 now is just better placed. So after knight takes e5 and winning a pawn, black's best move is queen to d4, attacking the knight. And now white's best move is the thematic queen h5. This is beautiful because you know the g6 might happen here, and then we're going to have to move the queen, but the knight is under attack. So g6, and now best move by white is knight to c6. Knight to c6, well, obviously if we get our queen taken, then taking the queen in d4, and we're up a bishop, we're up a piece. So after pawn takes back, white goes to f3 with the queen, and now the position is already evaluated as if white was more than up a piece. You'd be wondering why, but you know, think about it. You have ideas of playing rook f1, exploit the weakness of the f7 pawn, which is backwards, and the fact that we provoked g6 means that the knight in f6 will always be a loose piece. Now, in fact, try to develop the knight. Well, okay, castling longside is a suicide. So imagine, try to castle the knight in, try to play knight f6 to castle normally, and this is already game over. c3 wins the game for white. Black will have nowhere to go. Let's say queen to d8. Well, then bishop to g5. That will attack on the knight, and there's only one defender, and there's no other way to put another defender. If instead queen to e5, for instance, then castle. Double attack on the knight once again. The knight can't move, otherwise there's an attack on f7. The last setup I'm going to show is the one where the bishop is attacked immediately. So bishop c5, f4, d6. Knight f3, knight c6. Now knight a4. Bishop b6, bishop b5. What happens when black just doesn't care and attacks the bishop straight away? Okay, bishop takes knight, pawn takes back. And now, as we mentioned, the thematic idea of taking the pawn in e5, pawn takes back. We're equally material, but we've created that long-term weakness. And black says, so you know what, I've taken your bishop pair, I'm happy. And if you ever want to take my bishop pair, I will rebuild a better pawn structure. Now, of course, taking the pawn in e5 is a suicide because queen h4 check wins for black immediately. You can't move the king because queen f2 will be checkmate. So after g3, queen check, you lose the rook. The queen e2 move doesn't work to stop that, to pin the queen to the king, because you got your own knight in e5. The queen can just take you with check, and that will be it. You are more dead than my desire to be alive when somebody plays the English opening. In this position, white goes on with queen e2. And now we are indeed threatening to take the pawn. So let's see what happens after knight f6, normal move. It looks like this time the black player will be able to play a normal game. White goes on with the crucial b3. This is to be understood. We're putting pressure on this pawn. This pawn cannot be defended by another pawn. The only other pawn that could defend this pawn would be the f pawn, but that will create a very serious weakness, which, considering that this is an e4, e5 game and you got control over d4, d5 and f5, we're always going to be threatened to play queen c4 check, winning the pawn in c6. It's a typical move. But anyway, I digress. Now black castles and now bishop to b2, putting more pressure over a5. So after black's playing the very best moves, let's see how to take the game from here, and then we're going to close this video. Bishop to g4, pinning the knight, obviously, so we don't really attack that square for real. And we can't really go there with the bishop and pretend that everything's okay, because we will be under threats of playing rook e8. You're going to have to give up the bishop because you got always a problem of rook attacking this file with the queen and the king. It's too dangerous. You don't need to do that. White's best move now, as a matter of fact, is long castle. And after black playing queen to e7, put more defense over this pawn. Queen to c4 is the best move by white. We don't have to worry about the bishop taking. If anything, we'd be happy because then we can unite the pawn on the f file and potentially take the bishop in b6 and double up on the g file. Position is evaluated already as if white was up a piece, so you can just exploit this weak endgame. If you think about it, like if the bishop moves away to protect the pawn, you'll have double attack on e5. If the bishop stays and the queen tries to protect c6, then you're going to attack on e5 with an attack on the queen and the bishop, winning so much. Queen to d6, then you still have this move, bishop e5 with an attack on the queen, you win a pawn. So here let's look at this idea, c5. It's terrible, but at least let's see what to do now. d3, and after rook f to d8, white plays queen to c3, finalizing the attack on this pawn, and we're gonna take it. Bishop takes knight, pawn takes back. Even playing the best moves by the black player just doesn't help. We're gonna win that central pawn and transition to a winning endgame. Nothing stops us from doing that. Let's say, for example, move like rook to d4 or knight to d7. Let's say, for example, rook d4 with bishop to a3. The big attack now goes on the c5 pawn. If knight to d7 to do exactly that, to put more protection, then f4 and f6 to try and solidify that. Doesn't work because f5 now is the best move by white. The idea is to play rook to g1. Now that this center is completely closed, rook to g1 and then pile up the rooks on the g file, exploiting the attack that we have over the square g6, meaning that black can't play g6 without losing material. So rook g1 is very important, stops g6 from happening. You also have idea of h4, h5. Anyway, after f4 and rook to e8, the last piece joining the game, now we can finally take. And after queen taking back, the only way to try and preserve the pawn advantage, because if knight had taken back, then we would have had too much attack over the c5 square. Well, anyway, bishop to b2 now should end this game, because you're just going to move the queen away, you're going to make a skewer.